Hello, hello, welcome back. And we have a new discussion going on. So go to the boards. You can read about 3,000 words of blog post if you like. The subject is Mythicism. I believe the title that I gave it is Confessions of a Reluctant Mythicist. And you can find it at skepticsandseekers.squarespace.com. So give it a read and send me your hate. Skepticsandseekers at gmail.com, or you don't even have to do that much work. Just leave it right on the board in the comments, sign into your Discuss account, and let me know what's on your mind. So this topic is the introduction of a much bigger topic. So I will reveal a little bit more about my new project. It is going to be dealing with the teachings of Jesus. I won't say much more than that right now. I'll be dealing directly with the teachings of Jesus. And you might find that a strange juxtaposition to this particular discussion that we're about to have, Confessions of a Reluctant Mythicist. How could I consider the teachings of Jesus and not believe that Jesus existed? Good question. Not really. It's the same way that you can consider the teachings of Buddha as a set of ideas without believing that Buddha exists, or that you can consider the teachings of Confucius without believing that Confucius exists, or considering the teachings of the Jedi without believing the Jedi are real. Of course, if you don't believe the Jedi are real, you're just crazy. That said, I understand that mythicism puts me in the category of being just crazy. It's the kind of thing that Christians just tune out. Just tune it out. Crazy, madman talking. I get it, because I feel the same way about you guys when you bring out your shroud. I kind of shut down and stop listening. I try to listen. I try, but I'm just reporting my emotional inner state here. I can't really take it seriously. Nut job alert. That's what comes up on my screen. And I like many of you shroud nut jobs too. And I take you serious in other matters, but I just kind of shut down. So I know that Christians have this this reaction to mythicism. So that said, if you can muscle past that reaction, we're going to talk a little bit about it. And I brought along Andrew with me. I guess he's going to be doing some heavy lifting. I hear him grunting in the background. Or maybe I've caught him at a different moment. I shouldn't inquire.
What an opportunity.
So I
I'm gonna let it go.
I feel like I stepped into something. So yeah, so we're going to talk about this a little bit, and I want to get mythicism on the table and then off it as quickly as I can before my new project. Now, my project's coming out sometime in the spring, if I'm lucky, and so you will have forgotten about this conversation by then. But I think it's fair to at least let everyone know that before I delve into the teachings of Jesus, coming soon, I don't actually believe that Jesus existed, and I recognize that puts me on the nut job fringe, just on a different surface of the plane, so different part of the plane. So here we are. Mythicism. Andrew is comes to this discussion in a different place than I do. So you can know that Andrew and I don't actually agree on this subject. That is not to say that Andrew is not a mythicist, but he's also not a mythicist. Not a mythicist. I think I'll let him explain his position, although you may not understand it any better than I do. So, Andrew, how do you come to this discussion? You don't consider yourself a reluctant mythicist or a mythicist at all. So what do you consider yourself?
That's a good question. So, I am on the part of the continuum that just doesn't care whether Jesus was myth or not. I I don't think for me that gets far enough back to the problem that we experience when we talk about religion. So, um, Christians believe in um, this sort of three-person figurehead: God the Father, God the Son, God the Holy Spirit. And if today we managed to convince everyone listening, and in fact, we started a movement where everyone from this moment on would say um, that that Jesus that walked the earth didn't exist, we wouldn't actually change a lot of minds about about this God the Father, God the Son, and God the Holy Spirit business. And even if we move them from actually God, even if we move them to monotheism entirely, there are plenty of monotheistic Christians. So whether Jesus, an actual dude with two hands and two legs, walked around on the earth, I don't think I don't think we would change religion all that much. All three monotheistic religions in the world, well, no, there's more than three, but the three big monotheistic religions are Islam, Judaism, and Christianity. And so we don't appear to need this Jesus character overly much to build monotheistic religions out of the Bible. And surely some people would walk away from Christianity, but I don't think that we would solve the problem of religion. And the problem of religion exists in the Bible with or without respect to a Jesus who walked around on the earth. And if I understand your position, not speaking for you, but if I understand your position, you're a mythicist about this Jesus character, this dude with two arms and two legs that walked around and said some stuff to a bunch of people and had disciples and all that sort of thing. And while I think maybe he didn't exist, I don't know. It's not the thing that I make a meal out of.
Yeah. So I wish that I wasn't a mythicist. Uh, I don't think anybody believes me when I say that. So you don't have any reason to believe it, and I'm not going to give you a whole bunch of reasons to believe it. You just believe me or not. I don't like being a mythicist. I would rather not be a mythicist. It would be easier for my position, rhetorically, if Jesus existed, because my position is that he was a bad teacher. Now, if you say that he didn't exist, then that causes me to waste a lot of effort in the effort that I've put into his teachings. Now, granted, even if he doesn't exist, that doesn't matter. I can still examine his teachings, but it kind of takes some of the emotional force out of it if everyone agreed that he didn't exist. So, yeah, I would rather he exist and just be a bad teacher. Um, there's no upside, honestly, to me for Jesus being a mythical figure, and so I would love for someone to convince me. I can tell you, Bart Ehrman almost persuaded me a couple of times, but he could not. Ultimately, there were some problems that I found in his arguments that I couldn't get over. But I just wanted to maybe just begin the conversation there with the fact that even though I am a mythicist, I think this is true of all mythicists. It doesn't matter because we don't not believing Jesus exists is not why we're not Christians. So there's a lot of knots in there, but I think you can follow it. It has nothing to do with why we are not Christians. And so I would, I'll just throw it back to Andrew one last time. Andrew, do you do you actually believe that? I know that you spoke to this just a moment ago, but do you actually believe that Christianity would suffer great harm if trusted Christian historians came out and said, no, Jesus didn't physically walk on the earth? Do you think everyone would just take their football and go home on Sunday?
So that's a more interesting and nuanced question. Would Christianity suffer a great deal? Yes. Yes, it would. But it would rise from the ashes. And why would it rise from the ashes? Well, because the people that never thought there was a Jesus walking around, or those people who are committed to the notion that they hear from a God directly in their heads, or those people who say whether Jesus existed or not, his teachings, these ideas that we've encapsulated, are worth spending our lives over. Those people would, by and large, I think, convince their friends. And it's so it's not so much a matter of whether Christianity would suffer harm. Surely it would. But the problem that we have, I don't think, is so much Christianity as bad epistemology. Now that said, on the other hand, if we could show today that Jesus was entirely myth, the project that you're involved in this discussion, I think this idea that we have a human incarnation of a God, well, that would die, and I think that would certainly be a worthy step. So I'm not saying that the project itself doesn't have some value, but we get to this notion of things like transcendental truth, and we don't need a Jesus to get there. Hell, you've got well over, what do we have? Almost 8 billion people on the planet now. There's over 1 billion people in Islam. How many Jews are there? Hundreds of millions for sure. And Christians, make no mistake about it, it's not just Jesus they believe in. So if you got rid of Jesus today, yeah, it would hurt Christianity. But how many of those people would still believe in a God?
So I appreciate you taking up a little bit of space there. I turned off my video. I had some stuff going on there.
They're all thankful.
Yeah, well, we're all thankful. I love any excuse to turn off my video. So that said, folks, I wasn't planning on turning it off. I was planning on leaving it on, but it'll be off for the rest of the show. So sit back and listen and enjoy.
So what do you think?
I think if I'm gonna go ahead and pick on one of my favorite people in the comment section, to which the last board was largely dedicated, and that's Peter. As we talked about progressive Christianity for the last 3 weeks. Thanks everyone for all of your comments on that board. There have been some interesting comments on that board. Interesting discussions all around. We have a new board going on now, so please start populating the new board. In case you guys are wondering what the pattern is for me refreshing the boards, it's about every 1,000 comments thereabouts. So
current board's at 10. Well, the old board, since the new one's up. So the old board was at 1055.
Yeah,
it is at this moment.
So. Yeah, so it made it above the mark. So that said, Peter, I think, shows us a direction that Christianity could go if there was no historical Jesus, because I don't think that Peter would change at all. I don't think his overall message would change, because he's all about the message of Jesus. And whether there was a man or just a myth, there were people who wrote down this message of Jesus that we have today. And it's the message that is the gospel, not just the man. Now I know Peter believes it's all about Jesus, and Jesus is the good news, but Jesus is only one part of the good news. Jesus is God. And so even if there's no Jesus bodily man walking around, there's still the word of God. And so I just think that Christians could recast that story pretty easily. And I think that there are people who had a similar story in the first century that did not require a bodily figure walking around to be the word of God incarnate. So whether it's incarnate or not, it's still the word. And the idea of resurrection from the dead, you can still have that idea of the resurrection of the dead. You don't actually need this physical slaughter and revivification to have a teaching on the resurrection of the dead. And if you have to say, well, the Apostle Paul, maybe he was wrong about some things, I think Christians can say that. I think that they could find their way to get around and throw Paul under the bus a little bit if they had to. So I honestly think it might take a minute for Christianity to get there. And the Catholic Church would, of course, hold on until they had a good, coherent story to match the facts. But the Catholic Church would keep going, and they would come up with a coherent story that matched the new facts, and they would just keep right on into the next century. So I don't think that any churches would disband. I mean, maybe some would take a brief hiatus for construction, but they'd be back.
I agree, and I think in that there's a bit that I didn't talk about that I was considering, but we're trying to get on to mythicism, right? So I'm trying not to take up a lot of time with this part of what would Christianity do if, but there's a lot of money in Christianity, and to think that the religion would just follow. You were mentioning the Catholic churches.
Yep.
To think that churches would just fold up their chairs and fold up their tables and suddenly turn all those buildings into community centers or hospitals or shelters for the homeless or office buildings or whatever. To think that would happen, I think, just belies the depth that people are committed to these ideas of religion, and as much to the collection plate.
Right. And look, the church didn't fold when we learned that the earth was more than 6,000 years. We used to, and you and I in particular, I hope I'm not speaking out of turn here, but you and I in particular used to think that was not only a central issue to us, but a central issue to the church. Guess what? The church just picked up a news story, went on about it as if they never thought the earth was young. They just gaslighted everybody. Young Earth? What are you talking about? So, viva evolution.
Oh, I'm sorry. Right, and to that point, so I'll spend Thanksgiving with one side of my family tomorrow, and then we're going out of town to spend Thanksgiving on Thursday and Friday with other branches of the family. And in every case, all three of those days, I will be spending time with close family members who still defend the idea that the earth is 6,000 years old. You see, it doesn't actually matter all that much because how familiar are people with the science that disproves a young earth? How familiar are people with the sources that they would need to be familiar with to conclude with some certainty that Jesus is myth? We don't have that kind of familiarity. I'm not sure that we can ever have that kind of familiarity. The world is a big place. People focus on lots and lots of things. And if your job during the day is banking, or if your job during the day is fixing cars, or maybe your job during the day is hunting to put food on the table because you live in a poor part of the country and that's the only way your kids eat. Well, you may not spend a lot of time trying to understand science because it's not particularly relevant to anything you do. And for the same reasons, you may not evaluate textual criticism, look into the claims beyond Sunday school that you're told. Why? Because you trust those people. And the people that you're not talking to, the ones who might say, well, yeah, actually Jesus was myth, or he was just a big legend, or he was anything other than what you were taught in Sunday school. Well, those people are outside your social community. And so I don't, would Christianity suffer? Yes. Would Christianity die? No.
Yeah, it would suffer temporarily. It certainly wouldn't die. And, we have two groups right now. So there's the group of people who say, young earth? What young earth? Never taught that it was a young earth. What are you talking about? Shut up. And then there's the other group of people that say, the earth is young. I don't care what your scientists say. Shut up. Right. So you've got both of those factions. And if you have every scholar from the Christian side of things saying, yeah, it turns out Jesus the man didn't exist, you would have groups springing up saying physical Jesus existed. We never said he did. What are you talking about? Shut up. And then you would have the other group saying, yes, he did exist. Shut up. It would just keep going. So,
and this idea that it's not being taught anymore. So I live in the Southeast. Everybody knows that. Some people even know where I live. I've been particularly closed about saying where I'm from. And
can I say that a national championship might come out of there?
Well, yeah, it might.
Do I need to edit this?
You can say that the school claims 18 prior national championship. That might give it away. But you could just say, well, it's the state where the only team in college football that matters comes from. Okay. So sorry. Just leave that. Just leave it. I've insulted everyone listening that cares about college football. Except that I was right. Okay. So,
yeah.
Look, the point is, in the two towns that I lived in most recently, there are private Christian high schools that are heavily attended, hundreds and hundreds of children. And both of those schools require faith statements from their teachers to defend young earth creationism. Now, let me tell you that the city that I live in right now is a city of, the trade area is over 300,000 people. There's a school here. So in the United States, by the way, that's a mid-sized city. So right now, in this city, where the education is pretty good, the jobs are pretty good, there are schools, and this school that I'm thinking of that's close to me, it's not the only one defending young earth creationism in this city. Young earth creationism is being taught to children right now.
So I'm going to jump in and
okay. Apropos of none of this conversation.
In fact, if I were in editing kind, I'd just edit the whole last 30 minutes out of the podcast. I apologize to the listener, but that's how we roll. So,
just consider that the early bonus episode.
Yeah, that's the bonus episode. So let's jump in here and talk a little bit. So I want to start with something that is not in my write-up at all, because it was 3,100 words and not 4,000 words. So here's something that wasn't in my write-up at all, but I do think is good to start with. Andrew and I had some arguments about this earlier. I decided to include a little bit of this So you may get a preview of some of the arguments we had. You may not. It depends. But I wanted to start with genre, a question of genre. So let me ask you, the audience, are you a Spider-Man mythicist? Let me try another one. Are you a Three Little Pigs mythicist? That's interesting. Are you a Big Bad Wolf mythicist? Now, why do I ask? It seems like a stupid thing to ask, because you would say, look, these are comic books and fanciful fairy tales. Why are you even inquiring about the characters, the historicity of characters in comic books and fairy tales? Why indeed would I be inquiring about that? I think I would be wrong to do so. So it would be wrong for me to even demand that you state your position of whether you're a spider mythicist or not. So the Big Bad Wolf is a character that seems to pop up in a lot of fairy tales. He's the kind of the villain of a lot of things. And I'm pretty sure even stories outside of the ones you're familiar with, you're going to get some kind of wolf character. The Bible even talks about wolves in sheep's clothing, that sort of thing. We have these images of wolves getting into the sheep pen, that sort of thing. Big bad wolves are everywhere in literature and popular culture, and you might be tempted to ask yourself, well, who was this big bad wolf based on? What was the person, or maybe the wolf, behind the literary theme of big bad wolves? I mean, surely that's based on something real. No one would just make that up, right? Once again, you would never ask that question if you know that you're reading a made-up story, a myth, an allegory, a fantasy. You would only ask that question if you encountered this wolf theme in historical sources, in historical writings. Then you might ask yourself about this wolf theme, person, creature, clearly a metaphor. What does it mean? Who's behind the wolf? That sort of thing. But once again, you only ask that depending on the literature, and you would be insulted by the question if you deemed the literature to be obviously fanciful. So when people ask me about the historicity of Jesus, I hear it in the same way you hear me asking you about the real wolf behind the big bad wolf, or the real pigs behind the Three Little Pigs, or the real Spider-Man behind the Amazing Spider-Man. I hear the question the same way. And I think the reason I hear it that way is because I have a very different idea of the genre of the source literature than Christians do. I'm going to just pause right there and give Andrew a chance to jump in and say nasty things about my heritage.
No, I won't do that on mic. So first, let me say that Peter has already read the blog post, and he's first in with a question, and I'm going to come back and read that to you here in a little bit. So in regard to genre and whether Jesus is Smith, let me put a flag in the ground right here about what I am certain is myth about the Jesus character, whether he walked around or not, whether he said some things to people and had some people that cared enough to follow him around and tried to emulate him and repeated his teachings and all of that sort of thing. Let me just say what I'm positive is myth right now. And if you disagree and you can prove me wrong, I'll be very interested, and I'll talk more about the challenge in a moment. There was no guy named Jesus who went around waving magic hands and raising people from the dead or healing women from issues of blood, or making the blind see, or making the lame walk, or feeding people out of magic baskets that never go empty. Didn't happen. Don't know if you're listening and you think it did happen, why you think it happened. But if you think I'm wrong, your work is ahead of you if all you can do is pull out your leather-clad book with gilded edges and bang on it and say, but this book says this guy walked around and waved magic hands and did all of those things that you say he didn't do. In fact, he did other things. He turned water to wine. He stilled angry seas. No, he didn't. And if all you can do is bang on a book to say that he did, you got a lot of work to do with me. And I would welcome you proving me wrong if you can.
So I'm going to put a pin there. I want to come back to this point. I want to come back to that, and I don't take notes, so I need you to remember to come back.
Okay, sure. I'll remember.
Okay, cool.
All right. Actually, I will take a note. So we're going to come back.
Audience, please make a note here, audience. If I don't get back to this, will someone please put it in the comments that you had something to say about this, you didn't get back to it? I would really appreciate it, and I will say it in the comments. So
I've got a note.
All right.
The note is one word. It says miracles. So when I say miracles in the future, you're supposed to know that we're coming back to this territory.
So okay. That's how you think this works.
Folks, this is what professional podcasting looks like. Okay. All right. So that part, David, I feel like Isaac Asimov here. I can't prove that there were no miracles done by a guy named Jesus in the first century, but I so strongly believe that that is not the case at this point, that it is no longer worth my time to investigate.
Okay, you're just gonna make me do this now. I will come back to genres in a moment.
No, I was just pulling this on.
No. Just put it. I need you to make another note. Go back to genres. Okay. So this is how our conversations actually go in the real world, people. And in our conversations in the real world, we never get back to the topic.
Like 10 years later.
Never happens. Okay. So, right. Many years later. So this is, I was really looking forward to relishing this point a little bit later, but I'll lay it on you now. John 1, let me just say, Christians don't leave you or me with the option to consider a mundane figure called Jesus who walked around preaching apocalyptic messages, okay? First of all, Christians don't give a damn about that guy. That is not who they think of as Jesus. So there may have been 20 guys named Jesus, pretty common name, Yeshua, great. No one cares. And there were plenty of apocalyptic teachers. Again, no one cares. History is lousy with their bodies. Could care less. That's not the guy that Christians are talking about. That's not the guy they care about. And so if the moment that Christians start asking you if you at least believe that there was a guy, you should ignore them. Because I don't think, here, Marvin, I'm going to throw you a bone. Because I'm about to say what Christians actually think in their mind, contradicting what I said on the board. So here you go, Marvin. This one's for you. They don't care about some historical guy named Jesus who's not their Jesus. Okay, so if the guy didn't rise from the dead, that's not the guy in history they're talking about. They would say you've got the wrong guy. You know, we've got 3 Jesuses lined up as the possible guy that the stories were based on. And they would say, did he walk on water? Well, no. Then he's the wrong guy. That's the wrong guy. They don't care about it. They care about the historical Jesus that is their Jesus who did all of those things. Yeah, come at me, Marvin. And by the way, I will give this one to you. You're right. Okay, I did it. I went there. I I told Christians what they think. How I'm going to get out of this one this week, I have no idea. John 1. But here's the thing. Christians don't give you an option. They don't give you an option to have that guy. So I say this not just because I've talked to Christians and asked them this very question and got these very answers, okay? So this isn't just me speculating on what Christians might think. There may be some Christian that would care otherwise, but I haven't run into them. But the other reason I say that is theological, okay? John 1, in the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. He was with God in the beginning, though through him all things were made. Without him nothing was made that has been made. In him was life, and that life was the light of all mankind. The light shines in the darkness. Darkness has not overcome it. So I'll stop there because that's the important bit.
That gets you through verse 5. That's John chapter 1, verses 1 through 5 for those keeping notes.
Yeah. In the beginning,
go ahead.
In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was God, and the Word was Jesus the man. Now this is the beginning. In the beginning. What we don't have is an option for a man as a historical figure to become God. That's not given to us in Scripture as an option. Yes, I know that there's an adoptionist view. Don't talk to me about that. This is the point of view that Jesus was always God. He was always the Word, and he came from there to here through a human body, but he was there from the beginning. So this is, once again, this is not some historical figure who then took on the essence of God. We can't examine this historical figure that way. This historical figure started from heaven. That's the guy we're looking for, and he came here. Furthermore, we are given a narration of how he got here. Once again, taking away the option for looking for a historical person who doesn't meet this description. He came here through a virgin birth. Because he was God, he was already there, and he didn't come here through some manner of sinful coupling. He came here through a virgin birth. If you don't believe that God came here through a virgin birth and entered a human, you don't believe in the historical Jesus that Christians are trying to get you to believe in. And you don't have any option to turn that into some historical figure without the godlike attributes. Go ahead.
So I read, first comments on John 1:1-5. I don't think it makes particular sense. This idea that there was some darkness. What darkness are we talking about? Why are we calling Jesus the Word? What does it mean that he was with God? It's sort of, so the reason for the question is I don't recall a passage that says the Holy Spirit was with God. There are just things about John 1:1-5 that I find very stilted. It's very odd wording, and yeah, so there we are. But there are those who would say, this idea of a virgin is mistranslated, right? And it doesn't actually mean virgin. It just means young woman, right? And so maybe the Jesus character was a human being, and there are plenty of Christians who think that God the Father or Jesus or the Holy Spirit is never quite clear in some cases. That whispers in their head right now. Right? There's plenty of people that think they hear from God, and when they make those kinds of claims, it's not clear to me which aspect of Godhead they're supposed to be talking about. But I think it's fair to say that you could take the young woman view and just say that this word character in John 1, Jesus as the word, the Christ as the word,
Yeah, I'm gonna push
just
back on that. I don't.
inhabited this body that was ultimately conceived by Mary and Joseph.
Okay, I'm going to push back on that. I don't think you can. I think you could do that when Paul says Jesus was born of a woman. He wasn't talking about a virgin. And you can say that Matthew mistranslated young woman for virgin, which I believe he did, but he was talking about a virgin. And Luke didn't mistranslate. He was talking about a version. And the reason we know that is not because of whatever word they used. I don't care what the Greek word was, frankly, because it doesn't add any color to it at all. The reason we know they were talking about a version is because the story that they narrated. And the story they narrated was of a virgin girl who found herself pregnant without having had sex with her fiancé.
Right. So I don't think that creates much more difficulty, to be honest. I think it would be perfectly fair to say, well, they misunderstood the word, and as a result of misunderstanding young woman to be virgin, they simply
Fabricated the story.
drew the story around the misunderstanding of the word, and that's how you get to young woman who
Right, but if you fabricated,
so I don't think it creates a particular problem.
But if you fabricated the story about how God got here, then I think you've killed off any way to get to the God that you're talking about. Because once again, this is not the person that Christians are talking about is not a man who was born and became God. It's about a God who came to earth and became man. So you start with a God. You have to buy that first before you buy a Jesus. And then the story continues with, and the way he came was not the way ordinary men came. He came through this other way. So you have to buy this other way of getting here too. And if you're telling me that, no, well, we don't need to start with a God, and we don't have to start with this other way of getting here, then the person in history that you're talking about and the person in history that Christians are talking about is not the same person. It's not the same guy, because they're not talking about some guy that wasn't born of a virgin.
Except that the position that I just laid out is the position that some Christians hold. And so, you can say whatever you want there, but it is in fact the position that some Christians hold. Now, are they talking about two different gods? Well, yes, because we're all talking about different
right,
gods.
But we're not just talking about different gods here. We're talking about different Jesuses. So the point is, if you're looking for the historical Jesus, there are two words there, historical. So that's kind of a secular idea. Jesus, not quite a secular idea, because the Jesus of the stories is never actually a man in the way that we think of him. And so in order to believe in that guy, you've got to go through a virgin birth. And if you believe a version of Jesus exists that doesn't go through a virgin birth, hallelujah, but it's not the same Jesus of the story. So once again, I don't even know why we're talking about a historical Jesus if we're not looking for that one.
Well, okay. So to chase that for a moment, I don't think that Christians are necessarily obligated to chase your version of Jesus or mine.
Well, no, they have to chase theirs.
But to go further with that, surely it would be just as easy to say, without the virgin birth, the thing that made the Christ child, the product of Mary and Joseph, special, was that it was visited by a figure of the Godhead through its entire life. And that's how you get the special teachings, the red letters of Jesus. I think you can dispense with the virgin birth and carry on. And if you think you can't, you just don't know all the Christians I know.
No, I know plenty of them, and I know plenty of liberal Christians and plenty of Christians that even I would have trouble calling Christians. I'm pretty liberal with the term. What I'm saying is, if that's the guy you're talking about, you're talking about a different guy. So, in the same way that everyone may have a lot of different gods, a lot of different God views, I think there may be a lot of different Jesus views. But of the Jesus that I am talking about, and of the Jesus that I am sure most Christians are talking about, that's the guy that you've got to have a virgin birth for.
Well, so I'll pursue this for one more round and just say that the reason I'm pointing this out is that it is possible to tell this story with a young woman rather than a virgin and still have the Jesus character say everything that the Jesus character you're talking about says, and to still have him perform all of the all of these miracle acts. And so in that sense, this historical character, the thing that we would actually look for to identify this person in history, would be the exact same things. Because here's what you can't do. You can't look back in history and find this physical character and examine his DNA to see if to see if 23 of his chromosomes were actually God chromosomes. And so I don't think that it changes the idea of looking for this character in history, virgin birth or not. The things that we would look for, the claims about the person, the things that the person is supposed to have said, the followers that the person is supposed to have, all that sort of thing, it remains the same.
All of the mundane claims. But you see, all of the mundane claims do not, in fact, I would say, constitute.
Well, no, you've still got the miracles that aren't the virgin birth. You turned water to wine, he raised the dead. All of those things can still be looked out for.
Right. You can examine
the virgin birth.
Okay, but what I'm saying is, if you're saying the man in history is the guy who said the things that Jesus said, but maybe wasn't raised from the dead. You take away all the miracles, and that's what's left is the historical. Okay. Well, look, I'm still gonna have to cut it short right there, because we still haven't talked about genre, and we haven't gotten into any of the part of the. But yeah. So audience, you can know this is an argument that has gone on for years and will go on for years more. But this is also part of the reason why I wanted to talk about genre before I talked about this, because I think that genre bleeds into this and helps make what I am saying a bit more clear. So stepping back into the subject of genre, I think it is important to get a pretty good understanding of the type of thing that you're looking at before you start making judgments, especially historical judgments about it. So we're imagining a time a couple thousand years from now. Someone is looking at a comic book from this period, or let me just say a graphic novel from this period. I don't want Darren and his neck-bearded forces to come after me. Graphic novelists out there, respect, really.
Yeah, no, they're not.
Much respect. You're actually reading books. Whatever makes you feel better. Nerds. Anyway,
graphic novels are not novels. Sorry.
yeah.
Okay. Okay.
But sometimes they can be
So
graphic if you get the right. Anyway, so what I'm saying is, if someone 2,000 years ago gets hold of a graphic novel, but they are not familiar with the genre and they don't know what the genre is, it's misplaced in their great library 2,000 years from now. The first read through may not make it clear that they're not reading history. It's not immediately obvious. It depends on the graphic novel, of course, but it's not immediately obvious that they're not reading something that we thought was history. So there are some markers for how we determine genre, and I imagine there would be those markers, maybe even more sophisticated 2,000 years from now. But we actually do have some markers for how we determine whether something today is one genre or another, and we have ways of looking at ancient texts to figure out if they're one thing or another. And one thing that we know for sure it can happen, because it pervades the religious conversation that we have all the time, is if you take something that's, actually allegory, and you read it as if it were a historical narrative, you're gonna get it wrong. Will you get every bit of it wrong? Maybe not, but you're gonna miss the message. You're gonna miss what it's saying and get a lot of things wrong, because you have mistaken the genre. You didn't do a genre analysis, and you just read it, and you didn't think about what you were reading. So that way, you end up with talking snakes and people, clay golems that God breathed into. Well, there are a lot of Christians who read the Bible in a much more sophisticated way, who say, no, that's the wrong way to read it. You get people like William Lane Craig, who kind of have his, one foot in the clay golem camp and the other foot of, well, you can't exactly read it like that. You've got to, there's myth and history, mytho-history, that sort of thing. So it's kind of a muddy mixture. But what he and others are saying is, if you read it in the wrong genre, you cross genres, you take one genre and you read it as another, you're going to get the message of this book mixed up and lost and be confused. I'll just pause there.
So we talked about this earlier this morning. So they probably know, right? Everyone listening, they probably know that you and I talk about these things long before it ever hits mic, and we talk about it for a long time.
And sometimes loudly and uncharitably.
Yes. Sometimes what? I'm sorry.
Sometimes loudly and uncharitably.
Yeah. So we talked about this for an hour and a half this morning, and I decided that the problem for me is, yes, you can get the genre wrong, and then that creates a wealth of problems, and so I don't doubt for a moment that has happened and continues to happen. And so I want to just leave this as a question for those who are listening. If we take a book, actually, I probably won't leave it. I'll probably give my answer. Sorry, folks. It was going to be fun. Now it's going to be less fun. If we make a miscategorization, so we find an urban fantasy.
Sorry about the ringing in the background.
Simon R. Green makes some of these famous. His Night Side books. Well, they're set in a London of today, right? That place is supposed to be real, and the characters are, for the most part, characters that you could find on the streets, except that they get involved in quite magical hijinks, right? So there are these urban fantasies. Urban fantasies take the real world and then cast a story within the real world that's complete conjuring. Okay. Now, if we were to find one of those, and let's say we did miscategorize it, we thought the urban fantasy was real. The characters actually lived in today's world, and they're just people who can do magic. And so we miscategorized it. We saw it as real when it should have been an urban fantasy. How would we go about finding out that we miscategorized the thing? Well, we would start looking for those people, for evidence of the things that they can do. We would try to interview them. We'd try to catch their magic on video. We'd try to examine them in a lab. We would make no end of effort if we all thought that there was some hope of us picking up a magic wand and waving it to get our heart's desire. The trouble is that I actually agree with you that the New Testament is miscategorized. And the further problem is, I don't think there's nearly enough work done to help people understand that it's just in the wrong genre.
Right, but so what I would say is only the people who miscategorized the fantasy would go through the things that you suggest. The people who properly categorized it as fantasy would not. They would they would wonder why you're wasting your resources and time hunting down fairies. And this is kind of the mythicist versus the historist line. I mean, I don't know why you're hunting down fairy Jesuses. That just seems like a waste of time, effort, and resources. I mean, by all means, go ahead and waste it on that, as opposed to, wasting it on promoting your religion. But it just seems utterly silly to me, in the same way that it would seem silly to me if someone wanted to waste their resources hunting down the real Spider-Man. Why would you do that? Do you not understand what you're looking at? Clearly, they don't. So fine. You can use your resources any way you want to, but I would say that the way we avoid that kind of waste and mistake is by doing good literary analysis. So I'm not going to go into everything that constitutes good literary analysis. I will just say that for those who are interested in the subject, there is such a thing as literary analysis, and there's a such a thing as genre analysis, and you can look it up, and you can study this for yourself and recognize that it's not just some higgery jiggery that I'm talking about. There are some recognized ways of doing that. So I want to go over
Sure.
one guy, one PhD's work. I'll put it in the show. Let's see if I can grab his name. Matthew Wade Ferguson. And he put this out in 2016. But this is an area of his particular expertise. Once again, I'll put this out there. This is a very long piece, and I can't go through it all. But just to show, by the way, Andrew, this is not even the thing that we talked about before. So if you expect me to talk about that, I'm not. Yeah,
rating,
right. This isn't
ancient literature.
Exactly.
Right.
This isn't the mythology scale.
Right.
So there are some markers as to whether you are reading something that is fictional or something that is historical. And this is for historical writings. This guy's expertise is in the classics. And so he spends all of his time in the classics, and he turns his attention to the Gospels here. So I just want to go over some of the markers that you can look at for determining genre. And this was the Christian. I just want to hit this off right now. The Christian will say, "Oh, wait a minute, you can't judge what." How they viewed history based on the criteria of how we view history today. First of all, bullshit. You kind of can. There are many similarities. There are some differences, to be sure, But you can't simply just throw out everything that we know about history and say, well, they didn't know any of that, or they didn't do any of that, or they didn't care about any of that. That's not true. And you don't know what you're talking about. So here's some of the things that that you can see. Let me just go through some of this. Discussion of methodology and sources. So in with ancient historians, they often discussed their methodology and their sources. In the Gospels, this is I just want to say it's never done. You might take the introduction of Luke and try to take me to task with that. You'd be wrong. Be glad to have that argument with you. I'm not going to waste time with it on the mic. So yeah, even back then in the histories, they talked about methodology and sources. In more fictionalized or fantastical writings, they didn't. Internally addressed and analyzed contradictions among traditions. This is kind of an important one, and one that I found interesting, because as we all know, the Gospels in particular have lots of contradictions, but the entire Bible has lots of contradictions. Even Acts, even the works of Paul, lots of contradictions. And whenever there's two sources for a thing in Scripture, there's almost always a contradiction. Sometimes it's a big one, sometimes it's a small one, but there's always some kind of contradiction. Well, this is also true in other works of history, actual works of history. The difference is in actual works of history, actual historians often, maybe not every time, but they often discussed the contradictions and the various traditions that they're talking about. And so, you can see this. You can see this in historical ancient texts. They will talk about the various countries. They don't just sit there like 800-pound gorillas, or as if they're gaslighting you and trying to make you think that there are no contradictions. Of course there are, and they address them. You don't see this in the Bible, though. And especially in the Gospels, and you don't see it in other writings that shouldn't be taken as history. Another one, the authorial presence of the narrative, because of time and because that one's a little bit harder to unpack. I'm going to skip it. The educational level of the audience. This one was pretty interesting to me. So histories were written for sophisticated audiences. They were written for people who could, first of all, read the histories, because not everyone was literate. But second of all, they had to have more than a scribe's education of being able to, copy the letters and that sort of thing. They had to have a deep enough education to understand what the historian is saying. They have to be able to pick up what they're putting down, if you will. And the Gospels were clearly not written for a sophisticated audience. It was written in low speak rather than high speak, and it was written in stories and simple parables for a very simple kind of audience. Those audiences didn't have histories written for them in particular. So I did find that to be an interesting point. Hagiography versus biography. I will just skip a lot here and say I think the most charitable I can be to the New Testament material, in particular the Gospels, is to call it a hagiography. A hagiography is a kind of a fantastical, exaggerated hero story. And so it's what we might call legend building. And I think that's probably pretty close to the genre that you've got the Gospels. But hagiographies and biographies differed in a lot of key ways. Look it up. So much. I want to pick up one more here. One more. Not that one. That's also too long. Yeah, miracles at the fringes versus core of the narrative. So, miracles, you might wonder, do other historical sources recount miracles? The answer is yes. Yes, they do. Why? Because people were superstitious and they believed in all kinds of things. All right. So you will find miracle accounts in history. The difference is in histories, the writers were even then somewhat careful about how they recounted these miracles, often creating a little bit of distance between themselves and the story. Maybe pinning it on the source, or using some language that put some distance. But even in the places where they don't, these are not things that are core to the history. These are fringe accounts, as opposed to the Gospels. The core story is miracle. It's not just that all of the details are miraculous too, because most of it is miracles on every page, but the very core of the gospel story is miracle. You don't have a history of Jesus if you don't have the miracles. You can't just remove the miracles from the Gospels and it just be an interesting history. Whereas with histories, you can remove the miracles from them because it doesn't affect the core story, the core message of the history. And so I wanted to put that in because I know that miracle is a trigger word for for Andrew. Yeah, okay, one more. Important characters and events do not disappear from the narrative. So in real histories, important characters and events are brought up, and there's usually follow-up on those. In the Gospels, important characters and events are written hard and put away wet, and we never hear from them again. What happened to Joseph? The father of Jesus, the most important father in the entire world. We can call it foster father if you want, but still the most important foster father in the entire world. One moment, he's marrying a girl that's 12 to 16 years old, and the next moment, he's just not there. Because we're done with him. We're done. Historians wouldn't be done with him. But the gospel narrative doesn't need him anymore. What happened to Mary after the crucifixion? Last thing we hear about Mary. Mary, behold your son. He's talking to John, I imagine. Behold your mother, as Jesus kind of gives charge of his mother to someone else. What happened to her? If these figures died, why are we not treated to the funeral? The first church funeral of import. They're just gone. And I could go on like that for a long time when it comes to important characters and histories. This happens all the time throughout the Bible, especially the New Testament, especially the Gospels. It doesn't happen that way in real histories. So I just wanted to pull out a few of these. There's lots more. I'll link to it if you guys have time. You might cast an eye over this document. I'll get it in there at some point. If you don't see it in there, please someone put it in the comments. Hey, you promised us a document and you didn't. Okay, thanks. I will get to it if you remind me. If you don't see it. So that said, Andrew, I'll stop there just long enough. I just wanted to include this so that there is not this idea that there's no way that professional classicists have from telling histories from other types of things. They do. And frankly, classicist textual critics and such have made the judgment that the Gospels are not histories. It's largely only Christian scholars who insist they're histories. Others have done the work and said, no, they're not.
So that actually answers exactly why those of us who don't think Jesus was an interesting historical character that could wave his hands and do magic, you said, but only the people that misclassify the New Testament would be the ones looking to properly classify. Well, no. Those of us that see other people misclassify would necessarily be interested. I mean, if it was only 10 people and they were the harmless Jedi Knight Club, that would be one thing. But the reason that the rest of us are interested in getting it properly classified is because this is how people vote. This is how people live. This is how people raise their kids, based on magic. In some cases, based on this idea that there was a guy who could do magic, and not only can he do magic, but when you die, he can keep you alive. That's why the rest of us are interested in figuring out how to get it properly classified.
Okay, right.
That's why it's not only the people believing in magic that would be doing the work to try to figure out what had gone wrong.
Okay, but that's not any part of what I said. Not any part of what I said. Not any part of what I meant.
Okay, well, fair enough.
What I'm saying is there are ways to properly classify it, and scholars have done so. And they have been they've been doing so.
Harkening back.
And this, by the way, this isn't the only kind of metric, but I'm saying that there are ways to classify literary genres, and Christians, certain kinds of Christians, have a commitment to these documents as being history, because for them, sure, if they're not history, then they're afraid of the consequences. And I think they're afraid for not very good reasons, but they're afraid of the consequences. And so, but people who are secular scholars have, in fact, done the work and have, I believe, properly classified the documentation. That's why they're not scouring history for Joseph, the father of Jesus. Because if there's any character that history ought to give us some answers for, is that one. What happened to this guy? Well, no, let me tell you what happened to him. The author of these things ran out of use for him. That's what happened to him. I don't need to dig up a ruin. Because I understand what genre this is in. Now you can go dig up a ruin. I would like to see that. I would watch that. I would read the book that comes out of that. But that's just because that's the kind of geek I am. But I don't need to dig up a ruin to know what happened to Joseph. Because there wasn't a Joseph. No, maybe if I'm wrong about that, let me just say there's no way to verify that there ever was a Joseph or know anything about him. But if the only way we know that there was a Joseph is because of this documentation, well, once again, you just as well look up the real life heroes behind the comic book heroes, and you can do that. I think you're wasting your time. I think you're going to come up with the wrong answers because you don't fundamentally understand what it is you're looking at. And so, with regard to the Gospels in particular, I just wanted to let people know who aren't familiar with this that we do in fact have ways to we have literary ways that professionals use to determine genres. And so our hypothetical idea of 2,000 years from now, what would they make of our graphic novels today? Guess what? They have ways of determining what that is, and they will probably be better than the ways we have now. But if they just use the ways we have now, they're not going to miscategorize it. Now, you might, if you don't know anything about literature, you walk into a library that's been jumbled up and something's been put on the wrong shelf, you might, but the professionals won't. We don't really need to, I don't think we need to overly worry about mistaking Spider-Man as a real guy one day. So, let me see if I can grab maybe one point out of this long piece, because all of this conversation is actually stuff that's not in the write-up. So I guess it's good. You get the write-up and then you get the conversation. But it seems like there may be something in the write-up here that people would want some follow-up on. Andrew, you've read
History and education.
Okay, history and education.
Last point.
Yeah,
bottom of the write-up.
I was gonna ask you what you would want to choose, and now I regret asking, because that's not what I would want to choose.
Okay, well, we can do two.
No, okay, let's do two. I'll do mine real fast, okay? And I'm gonna do it first. Yes, I'm lying. I'm gonna try it this way. I'm gonna do it first, because then we run out of time. So I'm gonna do it fast. I promise. More myth than man. That's the one I want to do. If I were reading this afresh, that's the one I would have the most questions about, I think. There is let me see if I can think of a good analogy here. Imagine a golem that's made out of yarn. And, he's alive in the way that golems are. And you find a loose strand of the yarn and you start pulling at it. And you keep pulling. And you keep pulling until you unravel the golem. Well, at that point, the golem is no longer animated because all of the yarn is unraveled. What you have is something that's more yarn than man. In fact, it's all yarn. You're looking for the man underneath it. You get the yarn off, and it's just yarn. And I think when we spin yarns about Jesus, I promise people, I didn't tell this story to come up with this punchline. I'm just that good.
There's got to be afraid not.
Stop it. Stop.
Got to be afraid not.
First of all, if there was, get out of my joke.
We didn't talk about this earlier, folks. If that's the punchline, it's a miracle.
It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. If it's the punchline, you're never going to know it, because I'm changing it up right now.
I dare you to come up with a better one.
Don't.
Okay. Go ahead.
Don't push me. You want this to be short, right? I think this is what happens when we start pulling at the threads of the Jesus story, of the Jesus character. Once again, you read the stories, and it's miracles on every page. There isn't a lot about him that's not a miracle. It's yarn all the way down. And so if you say, well, okay, let's just get rid of the yarn and see what's underneath. There's nothing underneath. This is part of the problem with trying to separate out the fantastical stuff and seeing what's left. Now, I know that you said that that's not what you were doing earlier, and I accept that. That's what a lot of people are doing, though, especially a lot of secularists who are, they would like to hang on to the idea that there was an actual Jesus too. Well, let's just take all the miracles, throw them out, and just take the mundane guy underneath. You don't have 3 sentences about the mundane guy underneath. You can say he was an apocalyptic Jewish teacher of repentance. And he hung out with guys for a while and finally was killed. That's the story. By the way, that story could be told about a lot of people in that time. That's why it's not even a story. It's not a story worth telling. You've got nothing at that point. So in order for the golem of Jesus to mean anything, you need the yarn. You can't separate the myth from the man and come up with the man. Go ahead. I'll let you have that, and then we'll go on to your point.
So, whether Jesus is myth or legend, or some real character, or some strange composite of all of those things, I don't have any idea how. I don't have any idea how I would determine beyond the mundane, beyond the very ordinary, that there was a guy and he hung out with a bunch of guys. He said some stuff that a lot of people find personally touching. But by the way, I don't have any problem with that. We say touching things to each other all the time.
Yeah, it's not interesting though. No one right. would ever write a Wikipedia article about that guy.
Right, because we can record those things and we can be touched by them, and we don't have to know the guy. But more than that, how do I get to the non-ordinary? How do I get to the non-mundane? How do I get to the supernatural claims that he lives outside of space and time right now, and he's desperately holding out his hand, waiting for me to spiritually reach out and take his hand and then what, pledge my life to him or whatever. However you tell the rest of that story, how do you get me to the supernatural claims? I'm not being hyperbolic here. I am asking a sincere question. Look, I took the test a few years ago and documented it over on the Unbelievable boards. There was a challenge on the Unbelievable radio show for skeptics and atheists just to get down on their knees and pray and say, Jesus, I'm a sinner, come into my life. I recognize the error of my ways, and I am ready for you to enter my life, and I'll commit myself to whatever. I took that prayer honestly. Downstairs in this house I'm in right now, I took that test. You know what I got? I got the exact same thing that the people that took Justin Brierley's test at the end of his book took. Get 70 people together, have them live as Christians for 30 days, and what do you get? 2 of them, after the time limit, said they felt something. Go read the book. I'm aware of it, not responsible for it. I've debated this. I've debated this in public. I have no idea how to get to your non-ordinary claims. I have no idea how to be filled with the Holy Spirit that this Jesus character represented. And if you have a way to make that happen, yes, I'm skeptical. But the claim is supposed to be able to, the action that the skeptic is supposed to be able to take is supposed to be able to overcome the skepticism. So this is David's show. skepticsandseekers@gmail.com. Send in your answer. How do we get it done? How do we get to the place where Christians are that believe in miracles? Because that's the big question. That's the thing. You believe in a guy. You don't just believe in a guy that lived and died. You believe in a guy that lived and died and lived and was, and then ascended into heaven. The interesting bit isn't the living and dying, it's the dying and living.
So just a quick note there is a new email address for skeptics and seekers. It's actually reasonpress@gmail.com.
Thanks for that.
So,
Look, I don't mind. Send me your. This is a genuine inquiry from an inquisitive mind. How do you get to the place where you believe in these miracle claims? Because this guy, as David said, he's not interesting without the miracle claims. And as far as I can tell, they're just claims.
right. I mean, at best, you get from Jesus, being as charitably as I can without the myth. He's just Gandhi. Granted, Gandhi is definitely worthy of a Wikipedia page, but I don't even think Jesus. I mean, I'm being really charitable when I compare a mundane Jesus to Gandhi, because once again, the audience, the people who follow Jesus, aren't following him for his mundane earthly teachings. They're following him because he's God. I would argue that they don't even follow his mundane earthly teachings. Most of that they consider madness. Just look at anything that Jesus had to say about money or savings or investments. No one follows that. So they're not in it for the mundane teachings of Jesus. They're in it for something else. And with Gandhi, I would say they are in it for his mundane teachings. So if you unraveled, whatever myths there are around Gandhi, you still have a very interesting person. If you unravel the myths around George Washington, you still have the founder of our country. If you unravel the myths around Jesus, you have nothing but a tangled skein. So yes, you can acknowledge my mastery over that situation in private, Andrew. You don't have to say it on air.
just gonna leave it, and rather than chasing the last point that I was going to chase, which is this Jesus figure in education.
No, I'm ready for it. I'm down for it.
No, I know, but I mentioned way at the front of this thing that Peter had already replied in the comment section under the new board. And so his question, I think, has been answered through the course of this talk, but I want to just fulfill that obligation to the listeners and get his question out.
When do we ever follow up on anything we say?
Is directed to you at the bottom of your post.
What are you talking about here? Let's see. When do we ever follow up on anything? I don't understand this. Oh,
do you not believe that a figure called Jesus existed at all and that he had followers? Well, let me just. Do you not believe of? Oh, sorry. You see it?
Yeah, I see it. I'll go ahead. And
okay, go ahead.
Okay, look, I know that you like doing this even less than I do.
Yeah, I was voiceovering it.
Yeah, no, I don't. People don't understand. I'm not even going to try to explain it. Folks, when Andrew and I do a conversation together, there's so much inside baseball. Most of it doesn't even come out, but there are little weird things that you might hear us say or give a nod to. It means something to us. Thanks, David. Very happy to look into the matter. Sorry. Can I just clarify, though? Do you not believe a figure called Jesus with some followers existed at all? Or that he may have existed, but that he is unlikely to have said or done any of the things ascribed to him in the Gospels, or that we just don't know? And I would just go ahead and add Brian with a wise comment to this. It's very short. It's very Brian. He covers this in the blog post. Thank you
Okay,
so
I
much,
didn't
Brian.
see Brian. I didn't see Brian with a wise comment
He
yet. I
covers
must have
this
a
in a
refreshing
blog
moment.
post. I'd be interested in you interacting
Oh yeah,
with that. Yes. So
yeah.
thank you, Peter. I covered it in the blog post, so I'd be interested in you interacting with that. So this is kind of the incredulity question that mythicists get. After they have made their statement, they go over, and it doesn't matter how academically they do it, it doesn't matter how clear they do it. There's always someone who says, are you really saying that you don't believe there was a guy? Listen up, everybody. Okay, get over your credulity. I'm saying I don't believe there was a guy. Okay, can I make this clearer? I don't believe there was a guy. Furthermore, I also don't believe there were disciples. We can talk about Peter mythicism some other time. I don't know that I'm quite a Peter mythicist, but I would say there isn't a whole lot of really good reasons to believe he existed. But the idea that the 12 existed does seem rather fanciful. The 12 is almost a mascot, the way it's used in Scripture. And it's meant to stand for something symbolically. How do we know this? When the Bible takes the time to mention the 12, it's just like anything else. When it's mentioned twice, it's never the same. There's always a contradiction. We have two different lists of the 12, and no, you can't harmonize those lists by saying, oh, well, that's just the name of that guy in a certain kind of Aramaic. Shut up. I don't even think you believe that. We don't, in fact, have the same lists. We have this interesting scene. I actually find it an interesting scene. The beginning of Acts, Judas, he's gone, and we've got to replace Judas. And so there are qualifications that are recited by Peter at this time to tell them how to fill this important position. These are the qualifications of an apostle. And Peter gives them, and they're straightforward. They're plain. You can understand them. There's no coded message. And the bulk of the qualification is it has to be somebody who was following Jesus from the time of his baptism to the time of his death. And there were 120, by the way. He was addressing 120 people in that area. There were only 2 that qualified. There were only 2. And they selected only 1 of those. They didn't select them both. They both qualified. I want to bear this in mind for a moment. Just stop and pause and think about this. Why couldn't there have been 13 apostles? Because 12 was really important. It was symbolically important. And so Jesus didn't allow 13 apostles, even though they had that many qualified. Jesus magically chose someone from the grave through the drawing of lots. And they had to get their 12. Now, sometime later, although this was actually earlier because of the way the New Testament was written, Paul comes along and he declares himself an apostle. Paul does not meet the criteria of an apostle. He's not an apostle. He doesn't meet the criteria. Furthermore, by the time Paul comes along, Judas's role had already been filled. There were already 12. But Paul doesn't necessarily care about the 12. He's an apostle. Barnabas is an apostle. Maybe 1 or 2 others. But the apostle just means something else now. And there's a whole nother number to it. So who were the apostles? Paul didn't seem to care who the apostles were, just as long as he's one of them. One other piece here. I didn't mean to go into any of this. I'm just sorry. I have so much to say about this, and I know it's unimportant. When Paul meets with the pillars, Peter, James, John, supposedly James and John, these are the brothers of Jesus. Right? That's what we're supposed to believe. And Peter, the one to whom Jesus said, upon this rock I will build my church. Paul doesn't treat them that way at all. He doesn't treat them as if they knew anything. He doesn't treat them as if they knew Jesus. In fact, he seems to be calling them, in some cases, false apostles. He brags about how he withstood Peter to his face. These guys were nothing to Paul. He doesn't treat these guys as if their apostleship meant anything, or as if they had some position higher than him. No, he wanted to be considered apostle. One of these days, I'm going to do a series on Paul. I said that I would a long time ago. I will at some point. I'm just trying to get at this idea of, yeah, but we've got these people who walked around with Jesus. No, we don't. Historically speaking, no, we don't. We have 2 or 3 people who were prominent in the early Jewish church that we can probably, with some work, find in history. We don't have 12. Not even close. You can't give me 12 names of people that history outside of Bible can give us. Don't have it. Doesn't exist. It's a part of the story. It's symbolic. We can talk about numerology. We can talk about a number of things. But I'm sorry, Peter, this idea that you've got these historical figures walking around with Jesus and doing these things. No, you don't. You just don't. So yes, I am saying I don't believe there was a guy, and you can't show me any followers of his in history that would have fit the description of the disciples, especially the ones that Peter seemed to think were so important. You can't find me any of those people in history. Good luck. I'm sorry. I really like you too, Peter. So I'm sorry I had to go off on you like that. So apologies. Hey, Andrew, you want to say something to close us off, to take away the last rant there?
Look, I'm afraid the only thing that could be done there is post-show editing, and neither one of us believe in that particularly well. So there's that. Look, I am going to end where I started, which happens a lot when I podcast. I'm not sure why. Maybe I'm just not very creative. But where I started with this was, there are some things that I am certain are just factually wrong. And I know that Christians object when I use the word magic in place of miracle, sign, or wonder. Well, get over it. Probably going to keep doing it. So there it is. But if you think that there was a guy that wandered around in first century Palestine, and that guy, by force of will, broke the laws of nature. He fed people from bottomless baskets. He turned water to wine. He controlled the forces of nature with a word. Prove it. And then we can have a much better conversation when you bring that to the table. But bringing your leather-clad book and pounding on it to convince me won't work any better than bringing one of Simon R. Green's novels and insisting that the night side is a place that's hidden under London.
Yeah. I'm a secret histories guy, but yeah. I like the night side.
That there's somebody out there with a golden torch, and or the Ghost Hunter series. Okay, sorry, it's going to turn into a Simon R. Green show.
Andrew introduced me to Simon R. Green a decade ago. Seems like now.
Should apologize, probably.
Yeah. Simon R. Green, guys, look him up. So Andrew, okay, we're done. I'm going to hit the stop button here at some point. It's just between me and you now. So forget about those guys over there. Did you ever ask yourself the question, um, when you were a Christian, or even after, um, if Jesus rose from the dead, even just from a mundane perspective, never mind the whole God stuff, the Roman Empire executed a guy,
Mm-hmm.
and then word is out that he actually escaped death. And then there's an empty tomb. And so you can see that he wasn't even buried where he was supposed to be buried. Did you ever ask yourself why the Roman Empire, and by the way, the Jewish Sanhedrin, because they also condemned him, why they never held another council to find this criminal? Where was the manhunt for this guy who escaped justice? Where were the records of this manhunt?
So this was actually covered in a class that I took in college, believe it or not. And this professor, I'll just leave him nameless.
Was it Professor Simon R. Green?
Was that there was but you'd know him, by the way. His notion was that this kind of work was done. That the Romans did actually look, and they never said anything about it because they couldn't find him. So it's part of the secret history.
It really is a secret history thing, because that's not how the Jewish council worked. That's not how the Roman Empire worked. If there's some guy who escaped the death penalty, they would have looked for him. They would have executed the guards that let him go. They would have executed the executioners who were responsible for killing him at the cross. There would have been something, and then the Jewish people, the Sanhedrin, would have looked for him because he would have been a criminal. They would have had word, oh, that Jesus that you thought you killed, he's out preaching, gathering up more followers. They would have gone out to get him again. No, we don't hear any more about those guys. You know why? Because the writers were done with them. That's why. Because real history doesn't work the way it works in the stories. In the stories, when the writer's done with you, it doesn't matter what would logically follow. They're done with you. Shut up and go home. That's how the writers treat their characters in real history, among real people doing real things. That would have never happened.
So I am time constrained now, and not surprising. The holidays are on us, and I have got to go participate in getting packing done and getting things packed and yada yada. And but that does remind me to say to all of our friends out there who give up a little bit of time to hear us chat over this and that. Thank you for letting us into your lives. I do like the holiday
Recording
season.
stopped.
Oops. Go ahead. You still talk. It's still going on my on the.
Oh, gotcha. Yeah, it's on GB.
Yeah.
Thank you for listening. I wish every one of you, even if I don't get to say it to you in person, I wish every one of you the happiest possible holidays. And this holiday season, do some good. We have a family tradition now. It's been going on for quite a few years. We don't buy gifts that we exchange with our families now. We get together and we find someone in need, and the money that we would have spent on each other in gifts, we give to a needy family. We buy gifts for the kids, of course, because look, man, you just got to see kids smile at Christmas. But we take all the money for adult gifts, and we try to do something good with that. It's a tradition worth thinking about.
Yeah.
Again, thank you everyone for listening to us rant, agree, disagree, or take it under advisement. Go and say something on the board, but very happiest of holidays to you.
Yeah. Same, except I don't do any of that stuff. But the same, ditto. So I've actually already given Mamie one of her gifts. She's one of these people who has a birthday around Christmas, so she's mostly screwed. Because let's face it, that's a lot of money. So pick one. That said, I've already given her one of her gifts, and the other gift I am getting for her, I will get for her Wednesday. I'm getting her a new puppy. Because our dog
awesome.
is, what people don't know, is my 17-year-old dog Cisco. He's gone away. He's gone to the great forest in the sky, and so yeah, she will be getting a fox terrier poodle mix, otherwise known, I kid you not, as a foodle. Hey, not lying, not lying. She will be getting a foodle, and so that's going to be fun. Seems like I had something else to say to either them or you, but I don't remember what it was now. So, for anyone who's still listening to us having a hard time getting out of this show, have a great day, and you'll hear from us again unless one of us gets hit by a bus. And if one of us does get hit by a bus, I strongly suspect the other of us was driving it.